I'm feeling better than I did this morning. On my way to work, I'll sometimes put on a YouTube video that I can listen to while I drive, something that doesn't need much watching. So I came across one of these Christian TV shows talking about eschatology. And for those who don't know what eschatology means, the study of the end times. The ideas that, a particular religion will have about end times, and different religions have different eschatologies. And within religions, quite often, the divisions that exist within a particular religious tradition will generally come about over eschatological issues, maybe more than other things. We find this in Judaism and Christianity and Islam, how some of the sharpest divisions that exist within a tradition, meaning not only divisions between traditionalist Christians, Catholic and Orthodox, and Protestants, or between liturgical Protestants and non-liturgical Protestants, and so forth. But the major differences often come up over eschatology, and particularly the newer movements. Generally, eschatology is a major thing, and so whether it's Seventh-day Adventists, whether it's the Jehovah's Witnesses, whether it's the Mormons, although there are many other theological and practical issues that these various churches have, it's quite often around eschatology, and so too in what would be labeled generally as the non-denominational evangelical Christian. So too there's often arguments in eschatology between those who believe in a pre-tribulation rapture, those who believe in a post-tribulation rapture. Many Christians don't even believe in the concept of rapture, and so forth, and these different theologies that have developed in various churches, and that's what divides these churches is their eschatology. We find the same thing in Islam. Some of the major differences between the Sunnis and the Shiites, although those again are not the only differences. Obviously, the theology of the Jehovah's Witnesses is radically different than the theology of other Christians. The theology of Mormons is radically different than other Christian groups, to the point where most, when I say Orthodox now with a little o as opposed to Eastern Orthodoxy, but just the regular, just the Christianity that includes Catholicism, Orthodoxy, and Protestantism, generally will not identify Mormons and the Jehovah's Witnesses as Christians, because their theology is radically different than some of these other groups. Both the Jehovah's Witnesses and the Mormons in different ways, and their theologies are different one from another. Neither of those are Trinitarian groups, and so therefore most Christians would label them as non-Christian, to the point where, particularly in evangelical circles, they like to use the term cult, which classically had no negative connotations. It just often would mean a form of worship and so forth. But in our modern parlance, it's offensive. But again, that's a fascinating aspect again of many of these groups, and so too they'll say perhaps certain aspects of other groups, Christian Science, or even to a certain extent the Seventh-day Adventists, some of their teachings will be out of the boundaries of much of Christendom. And again, all of these groups are connected to some kind of an issue of eschatology. And like I said, the Muslims also, a lot of their different, again, those aren't the main differences perhaps between Shia and Sunni, but the Shia are very interested in the person they call the Mahdi. And so there are different types of Shiites as well as there are different types of Sunnis, but the Shia are going to focus more on the Mahdi than the Sunnah. Even many of the Sunnis don't even really talk about the Mahdi. And so too in Judaism, eschatology tends to be a hot button issue. It's certainly a major issue between the Zionists and the non-Zionists, or the anti-Zionists. Generally, between the anti-Zionists and the non-Zionists are not going to be as much of an issue in eschatology. Generally, what I would say, though, the non-Zionists say we just don't know, which is the truth, that all of us, we don't know. The anti-Zionists will generally focus on as I often do myself, focus on a particular passage, not just the oath, but also, there's a passage in Sanhedrin that could be translated different ways, but it says, Ein ben David Bach Tichel Malchus Zulus Israel. It says the son of David won't come until the least kingdom, the least government ceases among Israel. Some interpret that to mean foreign government, whereas others interpret to mean the Jewish government. It could be both. It could be, but most likely when you look at the context of how Chazal generally looked at these types of things, I would wager to say that it makes more sense that it should mean that there should be no Jewish government. I've even heard some extreme anti-Zionists say that this means Malchus. It means we shouldn't have like Hasidic Rebbes. We should just have regular rabbis and not try to have all the pomp and circumstance of the Hasidic Rebbe. I've heard, the B'nai Yol movement, which, in the Satmar community doesn't recognize either of the Satmar Rebbes, and I've heard them say something along those lines in reference to that, which is, I think, a little bit extreme, more than a little bit. Obviously, I disagree with that ideology. But again, the eschatological issues are, the question is the state of Israel, as the religious Zionists would say, Reishis Tzmichas Geulasenu. They're the first flowering of the redemption. Or are they essentially holding back the redemption? You know, that's going to be a big question. In the Jewish world. Or do we just not know? You know, and we just don't know until it happens, which is, you know, to me, I would say, you know, the healthy approach is not to be too focused on eschatology, and that's kind of what brought me here today to be discussing eschatology. That you know, I'm listening to two Christian pastors discussing how the Jewish people, and they make these, you know, grand pronouncements about the Jewish people and how they view Donald Trump in a very positive way, which I certainly do, and how they, you know, people say that, you know, God placed him where he is, which I believe God places all of us wherever we are. It's obviously major national issues like politics. Every president is placed there by God. Miodeim case because I got the Malchus. You know, in the Megillah, you know, Mordechai says to Esther, "Who knows if this is a time? If it was because for a time like this that you reached, you know, your position in the government." And the interesting thing is here is Mordechai is saying, "Miodea, who knows?" So if Mordechai is saying, "Who knows?" and he was a man with Ruach HaKodesh, he was someone who had the inspiration of how the Jewish understanding of what's called the Holy Spirit. It's not in the theological sense of how Christians understand, but rather a level of prophecy, even if it wasn't full prophecy, but he was inspired by God. And yet, he says, Miodea, who knows if it's a time like this that you reach the government. And so the same thing. We know that God places people where they're supposed to go in the government. But we don't know why. We don't know what type of time we're talking about. What appointment is what they... And so therefore, you should just always try to do your best all the time. Because you never know. Is this the reason that was preordained from heaven, that this is why you are you are where you are? Nobody knows. Who knows? So these types of pronouncements that, you know, this is the guy who is going to build the temple. And this is the King Cyrus of our generation, is Donald Trump. Who knows? And the fascinating thing is, and let's continue there. You know, these pastors were talking about, you know, different Jewish views, and then they spoke about the Christian view. So with the Jewish views, they said, there's different opinions, which is definitely true. They said everybody agrees we need to have a temple among all the rabbis. Everyone agrees that. The question is, will we just not care about the Dome of the Rock? Will we relocate the Dome of the Rock to Mecca? That's not going to happen. We don't have that type of technology. I mean, they said But with the technology we have today, we can pick up the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque and bring it to Mecca. No, you can't. I mean, unless you take it apart and put it back together piece by piece, and the whole dome and everything, you're gonna. That doesn't work. That's ridiculous. And then on the same Temple Mount, share the spot and have both the temple and the mosque there. Again, they're leaving out another possibility. The other possibility is that there's a heavenly temple that's going to come down when the time is right. And the Christians believe that. The difference is with their eschatology, the whole idea is, well, the Jews will build their temple, and that's where the Antichrist will come and declare himself to be God, and what they said in this video, make a Holocaust, because the Jews will, of course, refuse to worship the Antichrist. At least that much they say, and he'll kill Jews, and then, so they say, according to their pre-tribulation rapture theology and eschatology, that's why it's so imperative to save as many souls as possible before all this happens. But again, so what does that mean? So let's talk for a moment, because of course different Christians have different theologies about Antichrist. What do the Jews have to say about the Antichrist? Is this a Jewish idea? Obviously, any Christian you ask will say, of course it's a Jewish idea. It's in the book of Daniel. And so since it's in the book of Daniel, or it's in how they interpret the book of Daniel, obviously the Jews believe in this. Again, how do you make pronouncements about the Jews? Obviously a lot of Jewish people don't like Donald Trump, mostly non-religious Jewish people, and they were talking about this in this discussion about how irreligious Israel is, how irreligious Tel Aviv is, and then they're going to go talk about eschatology and this and that. There's some kind of disconnect here. Disconnect, though, we have to talk a little bit more, so then what is the question? And this is something we really have to discuss in general especially when it comes to eschatology, something I've spoken about quite often. We know Carl Jung, in his works in psychology, speaks about two great informers of truth: logos and mythos. He sometimes uses other words. And Karen Armstrong, in her books on world religions, often says that the mistake that the fundamentalists make is to mistake mythos for logos. And the other mistake that the fundamentalists make, what was that? Is to totally discount mythos as being something valuable. And we have to understand both extremes are the seeds of extremism and fundamentalism. extreme of mistaking mythos with logos. And we see this in the Jewish world where people take very sublime and beautiful midrashim and interpret them literally. Things that are supposed to be interpreted homiletically, and interpret them literally as history, and when they were never intended to be that. You know, my ancestor Shmuel Nogin wrote about this. There's a Rishon, you know, on the border between the Rishonim and the Gaonim, and you know, another aspect of this, you know, this question of mythos and logos is those who want to just totally discard of mythos. And they forget, no, mythos is an informative truth, but in a different way than logos is an informative truth. Meaning there are certain things that speak to our minds and certain things that speak to our hearts. And there's certain things that speak to our hands. If you remember, there was a movie, Metropolis, which a lot of people mythologize and also make a logos out of the mythos of the film Metropolis in somewhat of an unhealthy manner, and conspiracy theories and so forth, which may not be true. I have no idea. But that movie, the message, the moral of the story was that the heart needs to be the intermediary between the brain and the hands. And so mythos, which tugs at the heart, tempers our understanding from our brain and our work of our hands. But we have to find the balance. We can't, it's not Hefker, as we say in Jewish parlance. It's not a free-for-all. We have to find a balance. And that's the power of myth, is to help us find that balance. I mean, we know Campbell spoke often of the power of myth and how, you know, many of his students today, Joseph Campbell's students today, speak of how, you know, Star Wars is the modern day myth. And the thing is, people often will gain some kind of a spiritual real. Doesn't mean it's teaching you what's actually happening in the galaxy, in the universe. But what it is teaching you is some lessons of chivalry and things, and it's used as a tool, maybe right or wrong, but it gives people a certain feeling of meaning and understanding and spirituality. Not necessarily one coming out of truth in the logos sense, in the logical sense, but a mythological truth that transcends the logical truth. So we have to find the balance. And so there's a mythos around it. Eschatology is all mythology. Doesn't mean it's not true. But the prophetic word is not always precise. I mean, I do believe prophecy comes from God, word for word. I believe that the very letters of Scripture were dictated, obviously in Hebrew or in Aramaic. Those passages are in Aramaic. But these words were inspired directly by God in a very intense way. Obviously, the Torah is the most intense, and the prophets are slightly less intense, and and the writings are less intense, but they're still very intense. But that doesn't mean necessarily that everything is historical in the sense we consider it to be history, scientific necessarily in the ways that we consider science. Doesn't mean it isn't either, but it doesn't mean it is. It's a balance there between mythos and logos. And so obviously there are certain things that are poetic and not meant to be taken literally. But, when Scripture speaks of the four corners of the earth, it's an expression. It's not, and I mean, this is a big lesson that I learned. I remember I was in Uman. I had to go all the way to Ukraine to learn this lesson from one of my rabbeim, someone who I had a very strong shaykhus with over the years, although I kind of lost contact with him since he moved a few years ago. Pinchas Rumpler, who's the brother of Reb Aaron Rumpler, and he speaks about the whole idea that you see in Uman. You might see people who don't keep anything, but they have payas. Why? Because Rabbi Nachman said, if you come to my grave, I'll pull you out of hell by your payas. If you make this pilgrimage, and you recite the 10 Psalms, and you give some money. And people take that in the logo sense, when a very pious Hasidic rabbi said that's mythos, it's not logos. He didn't say it like that. He said it's an expression that, in Yiddish, "Chloros nemen bam the pious" means whatever I can grab onto. And obviously, we're not talking about something physical here. We're talking about something spiritual because we're talking about heaven and hell. And so he means whatever I can grab onto, whatever merit I can find in you, I'll find, and I'll go talk to God and try to get you, to be by me, together with me in heaven. Wherever I am, you'll be there with me. Again, it doesn't mean in a logistical sense. That's one of the foolish things that people think about the Hasidic movement, is they take things and turn them into superstitions that were never meant to be. Superstition is contrary to Torah. It's against the halacha. And yet people turn some sublime idea and teaching and consider it to be, wow, these lights are pretty good. Consider it to be, in a superstitious way, and it's a very foolish thing to do. And you actually have to go and make a pilgrimage physically. Can you make a pilgrimage spiritually, mentally? You have to actually get in a plane and go to Ukraine. I'm sure there is something you gain out of doing that. But is it absolutely necessary for this promise to be fulfilled, whatever it means? I don't believe so. I mean, one of Rabbi Nachman's great opponents was the Maranayim. And he writes that when you study the works of a particular tzaddik, a particular Jewish saint, it's the same as if you're making a pilgrimage to their tomb. And so if on Rosh Hashanah you learn a little bit Likutei Moharan, according to the Maranayim and Likutim and Chanukah, you're there in Uman. You don't need to get on a plane and abandon your wife and kids. It doesn't hurt to do it once. I did it once. And I recommend people to do it once. But there are people that do this every year. All right. Some people, that's their thing. I don't forgive them that. But as for me in my household, it doesn't. There's something strange about it. I might go again, but this kind of unhealthy approach. You have to go every year to Uman, I mean, I do this also, I try to go every year to Samarov on Chaf of. I think this year I actually went the day before or the day after or something. This farm they should bring this, 3 days before, 3 days after, within that week. That day is in the middle of the week. You still have a certain Indian of the yard site. Beautiful. But you gotta find the balance. Don't be an extremist. Don't be and that's the thing. These types of eschatologies, whether they're Jewish, Christian, or Muslim, is that going to start World War III? Is it worth it? Over your eschatology? When you don't even know for sure if this is just a mythological term that's just meant to inspire you, think about something deeply, but instead you're turning it into everything that the Torah stands against. You're turning it into, to bloodshed and all kinds of evil because you want to start a war for no reason because of your eschatology. Are you out of your mind? So that being said, that we've explained in a certain sense what myth is and the power of myth, and not to say that there's no room for myth. There is room for myth, but myth is not meant to be taken as logos. Mythos and logos are two different things. Mythos is to inspire us. Logos is how we're supposed to live. And they're two different things. In a way, the mythos is why we do what the logos teaches us to do. But again, a lot of people either discount mythos or logicize the mythos. And both are a grave error. So with that being said, does the Jewish canon of mythos contain an Antichrist myth? And the answer is yes. It's not very well known, but it's there. It is there. And most Jews are totally unaware of this. Meaning, most religious Jews are totally unaware of it. Some Hasidim might know about it. Some Kabbalists, especially the Sephardic, Kabbalists. It's actually mentioned in commentaries to their prayer book that at a certain point in the liturgy, there's a figure that's a little bit more well known in Jewish eschatology is Mashiach ben Yosef, is the Messiah, son of Joseph. And so the understanding would be like this, that the Messiah, son of Joseph, is a figure who will fight wars, and he may or may not die. That's a major aspect of the eschatology, and then he's somehow paving the way for Messiah, son of David. And again, there's different discussion. Is this an actual figure? Is this a myth? a lot of the Zionists are very interested in this myth. I know Rav Kook spoke about it often. Mayor Kahana spoke about it, as did his son. The myth of Mashiach ben Yosef, which it is mentioned in the Talmud once briefly based on the passage in Zechariah. And people make there's a book which has a very questionable origin called Kol Hator. It's most likely totally pseudepigrapha and a forgery, really, if you want to not be as polite. It's claimed to be from a student of the Vilna Gaon, but nobody ever heard of this book until like the 1970s. And so it was claimed to be 200 years old when nobody ever heard of it until after the Six-Day War, and it seems to be pointing to things with the Six-Day War. It's 99% it's a forgery, and yet a lot of people accept it as being authentic. To me, the person who means the most in this is the person who I consider to be the Mamala Mokum of the Vilna Gaon, the successor. He sits on the throne of the Vilna Gaon, for lack of a better term, is Rabbi Moshe Sternbuch. I would consider him to be the successor of the Vilna Gaon in our era, and Rabbi Sternbuch outright says that the Sefer Kol Hator is a forgery. And so if he says that, to me, that's enough to brand it to be a forgery. I'll be a little bit skeptical. Maybe it's not a forgery, or maybe parts of it are authentic and parts of it there were some extrapolations into it. Well, with this being said, there is this discussion of this character of Mashiach ben Yosef, and pretty much it's a major focus in the Kol Hator, which, again, I know a lot of people, especially in the religious Zionist communities, swear by this book, and it's most likely a total forgery. I mean, there is a lot of issues of forgeries in both in Rishonim and Achronim. Rav Yaakov Emden already speaks about this, and a lot of people say some things that were written and attributed to Rav Yaakov Emden were actually forgeries. So where do you find the balance? Certain things, even if they are forgeries, some people will say, well, it's not necessarily a forgery, it's what we politely call pseudepigraphia. Nobody imagines that the book of Enoch was actually written by Enoch. None of the books of Enoch. Everybody knows they were written much, much later than the time when Enoch walked this earth. That being said, is it channeled literature? Did Enoch's soul reveal this to an author later in history? That type of thing. Who knows? These are the types of things you can't really prove or disprove. Or is it, are there sublime lessons meant to be found in the book of Enoch that's irrelevant as to whether or not Enoch wrote this? And so too, are there sublime lessons in the Zohar, and it's irrelevant whether or not Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai wrote the Zohar? Things like that. I mean, certain people, especially people who like to discount mythos as being totally irrelevant, will say, why should we even look at the Zohar at all? It's a forgery. And the answer is, I don't believe it to be a forgery. I do believe it to be at least rooted in Tanaic sources. Sure, there are certain extrapolations that are clearly of a later origin. It's hard to believe that Moshe de Leon totally forged it. Most likely, these were ancient midrashim that were, commented on and grew through the years. But again, some people say, well, if it's not real, why do we even care? And the thing is, there are reasons why to care, even if it's not real. It's still part of our mythos, even when it's not necessarily logos. And that could be an issue to have in general. Do we use the Zohar halachically? I mean, we say we don't paskin like Rabbi Shimon, and some people say, well, we don't paskin like Rabbi Shimon before he was in the cave, but after the cave we do paskin like Rabbi Shimon, and these types of questions. And the answer is, you want to be strict like the Zohar, you can, but you don't need to be. That's the answer.
In 2 miles, take exit 87 for Pennsylvania 903 toward Jinthorpe, Lake Harmony.
So, excuse me. So then again, so what is the Jewish Antichrist myth? Do we have one? We said the answer is yes, and it's related to the story of Mashiach ben Yosef. Like I said, if you look in certain Sephardic Sidurim, particularly Kabbalistic, somewhat Kabbalistic prayer books, liturgy books, you will see in the bracha of Bodeh Yerushalayim that when it says V'chisei David Abdecha Meher
In half a mile, take exit 87 for Pennsylvania 903 toward Jinthorpe, Lake Harmony.
That
take exit 87, then keep right.
And we're going to understand that in the following sense that so what does he say there? The Siddur, it's brought there from the Sfarim Kedoshim, that when you say and the throne of David your servant should be established in Jerusalem, you should have in mind specifically that Mashiach ben Yosef should not be killed, that the Messiah, son of Joseph, the Ephraimite Messiah, called that, should not be killed in the war, should not be killed by a character named Armilus Harosha, the wicked Armilus. And so the name given,
keep right.
The name given to the Antichrist in the Jewish tradition is Armilus. It appears in one or two midrashim, and then there are other midrashim that expand on this myth. But the ancient midrashim do at least identify a character coming from Rome.
Continue on Pennsylvania 903 north for 7 miles.
Named Armilus, who one of the commentaries on this midrash says, "Zeh mashikorin balaz." Antichrist. This is what's called in the foreign language Antichrist. Is this character whose name is given as Armilus. If you want to spell it in English, I would say it's Armilus. So it's a Latin sounding name, very similar, excuse me, did I just say similar? That's not a word. Very similar to, the legendary founder of Rome. We say Rome was founded by Romulus and Remus. So Armilus sounds very similar to Romulus. And they're different, some kind of very weird legends and myths about this character, Armilus. but essentially he is the Jewish Antichrist. Not that he's Jewish, he's Roman, but in the Jewish tradition, that is what the Jewish tradition teaches about Antichrist. I would suggest, I know Rabbi Bart Tzadok on koshertorah.com, he wrote some articles about Armilus. If you're curious more about that, that's where I really learned about it, although I noticed it in the Siddur after that. But this is the answer. Yes, Jews do have an Antichrist tradition, an Antichrist legend, but it's purely in the realm of legend. It's not something that necessarily has to be taken literally. That's the big message that I want to bring out here is, we don't know, how to interpret these passages. It's just something that we have in our traditions, and you don't have to make a big deal about it. That's kind of the message that I would bring out here is don't be obsessed with these types of things. Trying to identify who is Armilus. Does he even really have to come actually from Rome and Italy? Could he come from somewhere else? Could he come from New York City? Could he come from Jerusalem? Could he come from anywhere? Does he even have to be an individual person? Can it be a mindset? This is myth. It's not logical. It's mythological. It's something to think about and meditate upon, not necessarily to be taken literally. These are the lessons that really are important when it comes to approaching myth. Is not to take things literally, but also not to discount them. Does it mean it won't be true literally? It could be totally literal. But don't be obsessed with these things. Find a normal balance. And so too, when it comes to these issues on both ends. People were very upset at Donald Trump for moving the embassy to Jerusalem, and other people were very thankful to him. And to me, it doesn't really matter. I really don't care one way or the other. If it's good for America, I'm for it. That's all I really care about when it comes to major issues of foreign relations issues. Is it good for America? That's what matters. And this whole issue, Jerusalem, this, like I said, my ancestor, I've said many times, my ancestor, the Chavos Yair, writes in Makor Chaim, beautiful and very important teaching, which is halachic. Makor Chaim is his commentary on the Shulchan Aruch, and he writes something in a sense of halacha. You don't know which way is Jerusalem. So one opinion says you should point to Jerusalem in your heart. But elsewhere it says when you're praying, your heart should be turned to heaven. So which is it? Is your heart pointing towards Jerusalem? Or is your heart pointing towards heaven? And the answer is Yerushalayim Shel Ma'ala, the heavenly Jerusalem, which I know Christians speak about that as well. You know, Catholics have it in their liturgy, the heavenly Jerusalem. Meaning, stop being obsessed with a city, with a piece of land. There are higher, more sublime ideas. And yes, at some point in history, we look forward to the restoration of the temple. We'll be able to do the mitzvahs of bringing sacrifices again. But we're not ready for that right now. It's not time for that. And in a certain sense, even some of the Jewish rabbis have spoken about a tribulation temple. Meaning to say that the temple is what we really have to worry about is in our hearts. Where exactly am I going here? I'm thinking 209 North. Do we have some instructions here? I don't know what's going on. Where's my GPS thing? Did it turn off? It was making plenty of noise before.
In 200 feet, turn left onto Pennsylvania 115 North.
Well, I guess it means you gotta turn around. So everything turn. Alright. Back on track. And there's a sign and a purpose under the heavens. Alright. I'm talking almost for an hour, rambling on and on. Do I really need to talk anymore? I think I do. So this is what we have to focus on, though. Don't be obsessed with these aspects of eschatology in an unhealthy way. Recognize them for what they are. They're myths. And recognize the value of myth. Myth is a beautiful, wonderful thing. But again, Maimonides talks about this already. You really think that a wolf and a lamb are going to be snuggling up together, and a little kid is going to be, pulling on the tail of a lion and the lion's going to be eating straw, and the bear, and these animals are going to be eating straw like an ox, and this and that. Maybe, but come on. It's a metaphor for different nations will live in peace. Nations that you never thought could ever live in peace will live in peace. And the knowledge of the Lord will cover the earth as the waters cover the seas. Meaning, obviously, that's a metaphor. The waters covering the seas, so the knowledge of the Lord will cover the earth. Meaning everybody's going to know about God. That's what it means. People are going to live in peace. And so the same thing, just like, these nations will live in peace. And so what does it mean that there's, the Antichrist? What does it mean that, the Satan is going to put in his last-ditch effort, before the end times, because he knows his time is coming to an end. That's the same thing the Christians say, the same thing the Muslims say, the same thing the Jews say. Recognize that this is a metaphor.
In a quarter mile, turn right onto the I-80 ramp.
east? I guess so. I am going east, so go east, young man. So anyway, these are the types of things that we have to think about. Again, not to be obsessed, but to learn the lessons, learn the beauty, learn the... At least now the sun's no longer in my eyes, but it's in the mirror. I can't see what's behind me. It's a little better.
Turn right onto the I-80 ramp, then merge onto I-80 East.
I did already. So, with this being said, so then does that mean we shouldn't be supporting Donald Trump? Of course not. Just, it's like Reverend Victor Miller always said, let's worry about, for now, let's be concerned about our people doing God's will.
Continue on I-80 East for 9 miles.
Are we doing what's right? Are we upholding family values? Or are we just caring about our own parochial issues? Focusing on mythos and forgetting about basic logos? And we do have logos that is parochial. Yes, we wear tefillin and keep kosher and stuff. But in America, we have religious freedom, and the left wants to take that away from us. And those are some issues that we should be worried about. Instead, we're focusing on these types of questions, and we're focusing on our differences. We got to focus on what we have in common. We're all children of Adam and Eve. We're all children of God, because God made Adam. And He made us, and He's guiding us in our lives. And again, this is where the extremism comes from. That a guy could go into a mosque while innocent people are praying and say, these people are my enemies, and shoot and kill 50 people and injure another 50 people. That's evil. And I don't care what religion. I don't care if he did that to a church, to a mosque, to a Hindu temple, to a synagogue. This is evil. But part of the issues that we have with this is also where do we go with it? Meaning, what do we do with these type, and the answer we have to talk about right now is just shut up. That Alicia Ocasio-Cortez could make this about the NRA and make it about, say, thoughts and prayers. That's what the NRA says. And she doesn't realize how insulting that is to people who were murdered while they were praying. And then, and I could get political. I could very easily say, New Zealand has very strict gun control. So how could that happen in a place with such strict gun control? The answer is, all gun control does is take away guns from the law-abiding citizens. But the sickos and it makes the rest of us, it makes those law-abiding citizens sitting ducks. I mean, and that's true. It's the truth. I mean, if there would have been a good guy with a gun in there in the mosque, this wouldn't have happened. And yes, Muslims have Second Amendment freedoms just like everybody else has. I understand, obviously, that's in New Zealand. They're not protected by our Constitution, but these are God-given freedoms. And I believe that, there should be people packing in the mosque, and in the shul, and in the church, and in the schools, or at least the possibility that people are. So a crazy person might think twice, just as a deterrent. He's going to think, well, maybe somebody in there has a gun and they're going to shoot me, so I'm not going to do this. You know. But if they know it's a no-gun zone, well then nobody's going to stop me. But again, I don't want to politicize a tragedy. So, these are some things to have in mind, to contemplate, meditate upon. You know, find the proper balance between mythos and logos, not to become obsessed with eschatology to the point where you're going to do things that go against the basic decency that every religion teaches. And just be a normal human being. You know, that's the biggest message I can have, you know. And I don't care what religion you are, just be normal. Well, you're going to say, what is being normal? I understand. But be normal. Just be normal. Don't get obsessed with nonsense. You know, like the guy who wanted to put on tefillin all day, wanted to wear his tefillin all day. And he went to, and everyone told him, no, we're not on that level. And then someone said, well, you know, and then he said, well, I'm going to go speak to Rav Scheinberg. So he wears tefillin all day. And Rav Scheinberg grabbed him. Rav Scheinberg, I remember him. He grabbed this younger man by the lapels and said, just be normal. Alright, I gotta figure out where I'm going. God bless. Please like, share, and subscribe, comment. We'll see you all later. Take care. And just be normal. Alright.